For the heels, I'm going to apply a base color. I could even use just Ready White, but I think I'm going to stir some Ready White into the yellow and the red that I have here, and just put a little light color as a base to these heels. Then I'll pull the darker colors over with a palette knife and create rocks. It wasn't that an easy sky that we just did, and it's so pretty. You could use any color that you like, really. There we go. A little bit more of this. Maybe even a little more yellow in that one, just to change the value once in a while. Now, I'm going to switch over to my palette knife. I'll just lay this brush down. And I'm going to use some of the colors that I've already pre-mixed. I'm going to add a little white over here to this blue-gray, I think, and start out with it. Might add just a touch of umber to it so that it's not quite as blue as the sky. And clean out that. I'm going to spread, if you can come down to the palette, I'm going to spread that paint out very thin. It's like glaze on a donut. And I'm going to cut just a little bead and have just a bead on that knife. Place it on the back side of the heel and pull it down in there. I didn't get quite as much on my knife as I needed, but that's okay. I'd rather have to go back and pick up some than to have too much and have to take it off. Rubbing it into that. I'm going to strengthen the color just a little bit as I come down these heels. There we go. Right over here. Maybe a little of that lavender color would be pretty in there, so we can get lots of shades. Yeah, that's pretty. Going to add a little more of the lavender, and this time a little brown. Move over to the heels that are a little closer. Notice that some of the other color is coming through, and it's leaving me a very granite-like texture. That paint is not really thick on there at all. Clean off my knife, and now I'm going to highlight. I'm going to take some of the red and the yellow, brighten it up with the white. I think I need a little more yellow in that. I want to marbleize this, so to speak. And I want it streaked. Cut across that with the palette knife, pick me up a bead. Maybe not quite that big, something about like that. Come to the top of these heels, and I'm going to pull that in. Yeah, there we go. On this one over here, I think I'll bring him back and flat. Just a little flat edge and then down. A little bit right in there. And over to this one. I want to cover all those pencil marks where I have done my sketch. I do my sketches right onto the canvas, and I do not use an ink pen. Always use a pencil or a graphite, maybe a charcoal stick, something like that, because the ink will come through your paint. It just continues to bleed through constantly. Now to fade this out and make it kind of go into the desert, I'm simply going to take some white and work up into that. And start working the desert. I may even come up into this and fade around just a little bit. Pull this little heel off so that it just barely shows in the distance. Add a lot of depth to this. Maybe even touch that up. Sometimes I'll take my angle brush and come back and add just a little something extra in there. Sort of a honey bun, you know, touch it up just a little bit. Now, I'm going to continue with just a little more white. I want just a little bit more in there. And we'll start laying in the colors for the desert. Start out with the yellow. Then we're going to come into the red. There we go with that red. And we'll gradually get it darker as we come down to the foreground. Lots of red, lots of yellow. little more yellow, and then I'm going to add burnt umber. Now that's the chocolate brown color that is so pretty. Looks like a Hershey's Kiss laying on your palette. Pick it up and just streak right into the bottom of this. Now I'm going to switch over to a bigger brush here because this is taking a little bit longer than I had hoped for. So I'm just going to grab me a big old brush and put this color on there in a zip zap, you see, and blend it in. There we go. Now I've pre-mixed a little green. The green is Hooker's Green and Umber, and I'm going to add some of the gray to tone it down and give me a very, very light green color back over into here. And go back in and start adding just an illusion of a little bit of sagebrush or grass in the distance. Maybe one right over into here. Add a little more green as I come forward, just a little bit each time, making them just a little bit darker. And the ones up front are going to be very, very dark. If you've noticed, my paints are very creamy. They're easy to blend and apply. A lot of people write and say, how do you keep your paint so creamy? They look so creamy and moist, and they don't dry out. Well, a lot of it is in the paint itself. Part of it is the wet palette, and the Ready White helps too. It's just a combination of factors, really. Okay. Now to make sure that these little things don't appear that they're little magic carpets floating back there, I'm going to clean out my fan brush and just ease it down into the sand. Just kind of work those colors together, kind of tickle it at the bottom, so to speak, and pull it out onto the sand. I want to pull up just a few little cactus out of those with this lighter value. And establish a couple up front. Let's see, we'll put a cactus right there. It's a little bit wet, it's not showing up real good. I may have to touch these up. Way off into the distance, little cactus back in there. There we go. Just at random. You don't have to perfectly place these things. There we go. Now I'm going to take some very dark, just a clean brush and the dark green. Come in here and say, okay, maybe let's pick a spot right there. Right there. We'll start putting in some greenery. Just crunch it in. Right in here a little bit. That's a good place for it. And right over, right here. Don't want it dead center, so I'll just back it off just a little bit. And I'm going to put that into the ground too. I don't want to pick up too much green. I want a bright yellow sort of highlight right in there to lead your eye to that. So maybe with some bright yellow, I'll pull it in there and hook onto the bottom edge of that. Get me a little more of that yellow and go zip right up in there. Zip right through there. Lead the eye in right in this area. Because this will be our focal point. We're going to come back after we dry and put us a lot of pretty cactus in this one. Even over to here, I'm going to crunch a little bit of this dark right down into this corner. Get us a little base for some things over here. And over here. Now, if you'll take a look at the other painting, at the finished product, we'll be right back. We're going to dry this, and we'll show you how to finish them off. Okay, that's dry enough now. We can go ahead and get our cactus in here. I'm going to start out with one, a tall one here, with the dark green color. I'm going to paint it in with my angular brush. Just one stroke right through the center. Only I didn't get enough paint that time. I need to go back and reload that brush. Make me a nice, good-sized cactus right in there. Then I'll put the little arms out here. Pull those in, and we'll highlight it. I like to highlight it with, I'll show you how to do the palette knife, and I like to use the angle brush too. I'll show you both ways. Get him a little chunkier there. Give him some, let him have a good year. Make him a little heavier so he shows up nicely. We've got plenty of room to work. Take the palette knife, and with a little bit of this yellow over here and white, I'll come back and rub in this same little pile. Get it on the edge of my knife. I'll come back and I'll pull it in. Just put some little streaks, because it has grooves in it, this cactus does. I think it's a saguaro cactus. Saguaro. There we go. Pretty, pretty. Putting those little grooves on that cactus. And we're going to put them on just one side. Now for the rest of that highlight, I think I'll show you how to use your angle brush. Same color. Just get a little bit on the tip of the brush and come back in. And you can do the same thing, you see. You get the same little streak on that cactus. So you need to try both and see which one works best for you see. Just a little bit of that brush touching that canvas. I think maybe the angle brush is my favorite. A lot of times people say, show us how to use the palette knife a little more, so I thought I would do that. Now, we need some little thorns on this cactus, so I'll pick up my liner brush and I'm going to go zip, zip, zip. Oh, is that a little thorn here and there? Because they do have lots of those, don't they? Yeah. Isn't that easy? You see, you can do that. Piece of cake. Yeah. I'm keeping that paint very wet on that brush. I keep going back to my water can, if you'll notice, and then tap into my paint. All right, there we go. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time. You know that there are little thorns all over this. If we don't get all the thorns on there for you in this time frame, it'll be okay. You can add a few more at home. Now I'm going to come in and let's do a yucca. Here we go. It's going to give us a couple of stems in there. That'll get us started. Back in with the green. Very moist. And there we go. Put the foliage. A little too dry. The paint is just a little too dry. One of the ways you can tell if your paint is too dry is if it breaks apart. If you have little scratchy specks on the canvas, you know that your paint is too dry. You need to go back and add water, you see. Okay. Too dry right there. Come down and do this one. Going to highlight those, but I think I'll get all of the dark green in, and I'm going to add a little umber, and we're going to have some sort of dead fronds on that one. Keep him up there in the air. But I sure don't like that one that shows up where it was too dry. Go back and go right over him. There we go. Down now to the ground. Just go ahead and pull them on into that little section that we have there. A little of the umber, just a little green in that, and we'll pull the bottom fronds on. Pull them down. Now you see, I dried this so that I get nice, crisp colors. And it's so easy when you're working with acrylics just to use your dryer and dry it. A little white, and maybe a little of that peach in there. We'll come back and highlight some of those little dead fronds in there. There's always a few of those little brown ones down in there. And we need the bright yellow ones. Come back over to some of the yellow and white. Pull out a few of those. Look at that little thing take shape. Isn't that pretty? And so easy. Just a few little zip-zaps with that liner brush. There we go. Now we'll put a flower. I'm going to use my fan brush here and white. Get a little white on there, bang it on my palette, bang, 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 and come back and crunch it around that little stem. Right in there. Let just a little bit of that stem show. I like to put 2 applications. I like for this one to dry, and I come back and add another one. Get a little bit of that lavender color, and even give a little shadowy look to some of those little flowers. Now, wasn't that easy? You see, you can do that. Now let me get my angle brush again, and I'll show you how to do a prickly pear. Here we go. I'm going to come in and I say it looks like Mickey Mouse ears. Doesn't that look like a Mickey Mouse ear? Then we'll put those little ears out there. See those little things? Maybe a big one over here. Put him some little ears on him. A couple of little ones sitting at the base. They just grow all over the place. Might even want to put one over here. Now I'm going to move over to the left corner. And a couple of them over here. Laying in the base color, I'm going to come back and highlight. Yeah, looking pretty. I like a lot of little ones on, kind of growing out on the edges here just a little bit. And I'm going to highlight these with the yellow and white. I'm going to start back on the right over here and kind of work my way this way. Might as well do it that way, huh? Notice how I take the little point of the angle brush and just one little swoop. It's just a little twist of that brush. And you get a little highlight right on those little... And even when you just have a little dark mass, you can come back and do that with the yellow and white and create one just in a dark mass without even having to paint the cactus in first. On over to here. Oops, that was a little too much on that brush. I need to soften that edge just a little bit. A little more paint. Trying to stay out of your way there so you can see this very nicely. Maybe another one in there. And I like to put some flowers on these. I'm going to use some red and white today and just kind of tap it together. Just a little bright, colorful flower in there. And just tap it with the point of that angle brush. Just tap, tap, tap. Give them some pretty little flowers. Isn't that pretty? Yeah. Adds a lot of interest, you see. And it's so easy. It looks like a lot of detail, and yet it's not. Now I'm going to add a little more foliage around the bottom of this. I may even stick a rock in there. Start back over at the right and into this dark green. Now, remember I told you that many times we can use the little piece that comes off the canvas, and it helps us to control the paint that we put in. So I'll use it, and it keeps it off of the ground because I've already worked that area. I don't need to go back and do anything there. Now down into here, it wouldn't hurt to kind of overlap a little bit of that and kind of tuck that groundwork in. Move over to the other side. Let's see, right in the middle, I may put just a little bit right in there. Just a little bit to tuck in that little cactus. Something about like that. I need to highlight again. I'm going to come back in, dirty sponge, into the yellow, maybe over into some of this pink. Really making a mess on this palette now, aren't I? But that's fun, you see. You don't have to be real neat. You just have to have a lot of fun. Tap in some of those highlights. Got to go back and put all those little prickly things on those cactus. Let them dry just a touch as I do that. Now, a lot of times I'll even take a little bit of this gray and tap into that sponge. And like a little reflected light. Oops, that's just a little too much reflected light. And kind of put a little gray in some of this down here, a little shadowy color. Just to make it a little bit prettier, you see. Where's my liner brush? There we go. Let me back off and see what I need to do here. I'm going to take the liner brush and the dark green and pull out the little spines on my cactus now. Now, don't you think you can do this? I think you can. The patterns for all of the things that I teach in this series are in the book. They're in black and white, and you get 4 color separations. And it shows you step by step how to do everything. And I know it's tough when you look at a painting. Sometimes you say, oh, gee, can't do that. But if you stop and think about it, if it's just the sky, you could do that. And that's all it is, because it's all you work at one time. And if it were just this rock, you could do that. And then if it's just this rock, and it's just a lot of pieces hooked together, you see, it's like a puzzle, and when you get all the pieces together, you have a painting. So you can do all those things. It's just a step-by-step process. So don't be frightened off because you see the total thing. Look at it in small parts. It's like a goal that you set. When you set a goal for yourself, oh, it just seems insurmountable. But if you break it down into a daily plan, you can achieve it. Anyone can paint. I've only been doing this a few years. Look at that. Now I want some of those little yellow ones in there. I want to get you some bright ones so that you can see some of the bright little things in there. There we go. Now, you may not be able to see it real well, but when you see it in real life, all those little things add depth. It makes it look round. It adds an awful lot. Okay. Even some little yellow ones on this one. Going to come back into this one over here. And I want to add a different little cactus here and there, and I'm going to speckle this, and that'll be about all the time we have today. But I think you've learned a lot, and that you can change your composition around. You can do this one and a lot more. I'm going to come in here and tap a little bit up into here, a little something like this. I can't remember the name of this one right off. Hang on. Put him in there like that. A little bit of red flower. He has a little red right on top of him sometimes. We give him a little red flower. Want to put a little rock in, a couple of double-load rocks. Come into some of the brown. Load my brush with the dark color. Maybe wipe it across some of these light shades. Come into this area and maybe lay a couple of little rocks out into there. A big old boulder right into there. Where he sits down on the ground, if he looks a little too abrupt, you just simply slide it with your finger. Isn't that easy? You see, you can do that maybe right into this cluster. Going to put me a little rock in there and get me some highlights right in here. Kind of pull him out. I could add several rocks, but I do want to show you a couple little splatters. I'm just going to flip it with my fan brush there. And a little of these light colors right down in there to give it a look of gravel. Just a little look of gravel. And I think he's ready to be signed. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll come back and paint with me again.